Thank you, nice robot voice lady. Hi, my name is Kirby. I am your speaker today. My the reason why this whole thing came about is because one of my main special interests is the social safety film, and I've always had this vested interest in horror. So combine the two, why not? So this is your brain on blood, social safety films and horror. So Prologue, Reefer Madness musical. So I saw this back in college, but it was originally created in 1998 in LA. Fun fact, it was created by the people who later did the Heathers musical, but it was based on the 1936 film, which we'll talk about later, first staged in 1998, filmed in 2005. That's Kristen Bell up there. If you notice right up there, that's Mary Lane. And it follows the same sort of beats of the film with more psychedelic elements. You do get the usual like boy and girl fall in love, boy smokes reefer, boy kills an old man and then his girlfriend in an accident, and then it just nearly gets a chair and all his jailers die. But also you get Jimmy smoking weed and then being transported to an orgy with Vader, and Joan of Arc and Jesus banding together to sort of bring him back from smoking weed. It's it's a very interesting film and a very interesting musical. And the fun thing about a musical that the film doesn't have, a very fun and very interesting thing, is that it's very similar. You get to see the townspeople coming together to help Jimmy and destroy the Reefer. And as that happens, there's a fourth wall break in one of the lyrics. The lyrics in question are, and once the Reefer has been destroyed, we'll start on Darwin and Sigmund Freud, and sex depicted on celluloid, and communists in Queens. You'll find that there are like similar beats of this happening now, but we're going to get to that. We are going to get to that. But first, I want to sort of start where all of this sort of started, and that is with the American Hays Code. To your right, you will see a piece called Thou Shalt Not, which is created by the Paramount photographer A.L. Schaefer, known as Whitey, and it breaks in one image nearly every single rule given by the Hays Code, at least all the visual ones. So you can see visible lingerie, the inside of the thigh, weaponry, a cop being defeated. I will say, personally, I adore this image on a non-ironic level. It's very, very fun. But this broke a lot of the big rules put in part by the Hays Code. And the Hays Code origins are basically, it started in 1934, ended in 1968, and it was named after William H. Hays, who was the president of the MPAA, which is a Motion Picture Association. I'm sorry about that. That enforced the code, but it was widely spearheaded by Joseph Breen in connection with several conservative senators and Catholic bishops, and began sort of due to his perceived moral seediness in Hollywood. If you've ever read the book Hollywood Babylon by Kenneth Anger, may he rest in peace, that he goes into a lot of that sort of thing around that era. There's the Arbuckle scandal, there's the murder of I'm blanking on this man's name. William Taylor, I believe it was. William Taylor. All of that sort of led onward into this deep clench down on everything that was perceived as twisted and perverted in Hollywood at the time. And it started to weaken in the 1950s due to sort of the rise of television and the transgressiveness of directors like Preminger and Hitchcock and Fleischer, along with a bunch of Supreme Court cases. And it was replaced in 1968 with the film rating system. So you get G, PG, PG-13, R, and C-17. That's the American version. I do not entirely remember exactly what it is in England, but it's sort of along the same lines there. But this is what it was placed by. So what was rendered absolutely untouchable by the Hays Code? Homosexuality in all forms, mixed race relationships, cheating, any sexual act considered perverted, that's very vague and used very harshly. Disrespect of authority figures, cursing, say for like a couple words like hell and damn in some context. And most importantly, unpunished criminal acts. And during that time, a lot of things were unpunished criminal acts, including homosexuality, including, in some places, mixed race relationships. So, how does this tie into social safety film? What is a social safety film even? They're also known as social guidance films, hygiene films, or in some cases, propaganda films. Not all propaganda involves social safety, but all social safety films have elements of propaganda. They are usually used to attempt to educate kids and adults on how to behave. Safe topics were like being polite, proper grammar, social stuff, dating, patriotism, don't litter, that kind of thing. But the ones for older audiences led more to things like drug use and puberty and prejudice and juvenile delinquency and driver safety. Those are the films that we're going to be focusing on today. So there was a film prior to The Case That Kills, but it's so dissolved into time. And that's the thing, you need to preserve your media because you will get films dissolved in time like Cocaine, which has nothing on it, not even on Wikipedia or IMDb, but it was the first real like social safety film to deal with the issue of cocaine use. And apparently it was not very good. And the main thing that people remembered at it is a very, very unfortunate case of yellow face. But the thing, but the thing that you'll remember at the social safety film that people actually remember is The Pace That Kills. And it's sort of the same lines as Reefer Madness, but with cocaine. Boy meets girl, boy gets girl hooked on coke, girl blows boy's head off before getting arrested. Very boring, very typical period. Reissued as Cocaine Fiends, way less fun name. 2 years later, with just a similar lack of splash. And I must be mentioning it honestly, because of the posters. Look at these things. These must have been the equivalent of the Scarface poster in the teen boys in the college boys dorm room at the time, because look at them. As you can kind of see, they're already starting to play a little bit of horror in these elements. But then we get to the real starter, Reefer Madness. Look at this poster, just the dead eyes. But a similar story, it beats the pace. Most notably, the boy gets addicted first to the girl. Far more risque than Pace 2. You actually get to see Mary Jane's dead body on the ground when she dies. There's no blood, but you get to see it happen. And you get to see May, one of the dealers, jump out of the window when she's on the way to testify against her boyfriend, who is also a dealer. But it also made slightly more of a splash, but it only really got started in the exploitation circuit. That people bought it, people exhibited around, just being like, hey, don't do drugs, kids, but also look at how weird this thing is. Nobody took it seriously even back then, except, of course, for like conservative parents in the suburbs. And now it's just basically entirely used for comedic purposes. Like you will see this thing get roasted again and again and again and again. It has a musical about it, as I talk about. It's a laughing stock. And of course, the one thing that managed to actually hook parents in was the thought and the fear that the next tragedy may be that of your daughter or your son or yours or yours or yours. So the genre sort of died down after Reefer Madness for a little while because, World War II was happening. We had to focus on war propaganda, films to sort of bring up morale and support the troops. But it came back with a vengeance after World War II because this was a world that was ravaged by the specter of sharply focused on communist threats, the Nazi regime, and all of these filmmakers who had been into the war came back marked from that with this internal change in them. They'd seen the worst humanity and they wanted to come back and try and make things better. And how are they going to do that? To scare America, and by scaring America into social and moral enlightenment. And that's where we get what we know today as social safety film. So post World War II, the social safety film scene was dominated by 3 companies. So you have Coronet, Centron or Young America, and Encyclopedia Britannica. Only one of these companies still exists, and I'm sure you can guess which one. But each got their starts making educational films for the military. But like now, there were a few indie filmmakers out there mixing it up, including Sid Davis, who we'll talk way more about later. Because boy howdy. But they helped transition the safety film into a school setting. We're not going to talk about a lot of like stuff made specifically for schools, because obviously those were more focused on children and like young teenagers who just want to learn about, oh, how do I keep the streets clean? How do I salute the flag properly? How do I have good posture? That's an actual film. But a very good subgenre of this is the driving safety film. That's an important subset, but these will usually be relatively innocent themselves. They're teaching turn signals, who has the right of way, that kind of thing. But a lot of these were focused on teenage drivers, the stereotypically foolish motorists, and how they could potentially kill themselves or someone else. One PSA, The Last State from 1950, even gave the phenomenon a name. Teenicide is the fine art of killing yourself and maybe somebody else before you turn the age of 20. It's easy, really. You do it with an automobile. So you can imagine that I don't know if my mother saw this when she was my age, but I would not be surprised. The bottles, throbbing the blood. Most of the PSAs were bloodless. Like in The Last Day, you get to hear the teenicide thing, but you don't see what happens to the young couple when they hit the car. You only get the impression that the boy died, the girl's face gets ruined. But you do get to see that in some places. You get to see that Bottle and Throttle, which is made by Sid Davis, who once again we'll get into. That shows, in actuality, a woman and her daughter being killed by a drunk driver. And you get anti-speeding PSAs, which actually show a teenage boy dying from speeding. And the train station PSAs, which if you came in before the call started, I talked about that a little bit, the MST3 case of it. Last Chance and Days of Our Years. You get to see death in those, not graphic, and of course, not real. All of this is active. You didn't get to see even a bit of real blood in safety films, right? And that's true, unless you found yourself driving on red asphalt. So with sinister films like Signal 30 and its bluntly titled sequel, Mechanized Death, like people say a lot that Red Asphalt, Mechanized Death, 2 different things. They're not. Red Asphalt has the sequel is Mechanized Death. And they're essentially both thinly veiled, just snuff films masquerading as PSA, just driving snuff films. Because every single video in this 5-part series has actual real life car crash victims, dead and alive. You get to see everything. No theater blood, no implications, just real world death. And LA Times writer Martin Smith characterized these films as the reefer madness of driving. Forget trying to reason with teenagers, just scare them. Obviously, I won't be showing you like clips from these, but they're out there. And you need to realize the last of these was made back in the 80s. The last of these was made back in the 80s. In March of 2016 and 2006 because they were still being shown back then. And I want you to think about this. Not just what's on screen, but also the fact that when we were having the talks about whether, is Cannibal Holocaust real? Are the guinea pig films real? While those conversations were happening, in the States, we were actually showing driver safety films with real death, and nobody was saying anything because they all had the same purpose: fear. It was just the difference in like reasoning. Cannibal Holocaust wants to scare you for fun. Mechanized Death wants to scare you so you don't slam to a tree and kill yourself. Which one is okay? Which one isn't? Before I go into my next portion, I do want to like talk about a couple little like safety films notes from the States. There's More Dangerous Dynamite, which is a curated collection of dangerous gasoline warnings, including washing clothes with gas. People used to do that. Drugs Are Like That, which is a non-incomprehensible drug PSA, which features the voice of orange juice saleswoman and well-earned pie in the face victim Anita Bryant. Cheating, which is the most Bergman-esque film about cheating exams you'll ever see. And the series It's 10 p.m. Do You Know Where Your Children Are? Which was this surprisingly like star-studded little series of quick PSAs reminding people to check on their children back in the 60s, 80s. And the one you will see right now is Andy Warhol.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
You can see how awkward Andy looked in that PSA.
It's 10 p.m.
There we go. But of course, it's not just us. It's not just the United States that's engaging all of us. I have a very limited scope of PSAs that I've actually like looked into, both because of like time and the struggle it takes to find them. Because let's be real, preservation of media is a very difficult thing, and that happens a lot in PSAs where they've just lost the ages. But there's PSAs for every single country on Earth. A lot of them available on YouTube, but I can't really go through all of them in what I have for time and what I have for my language barrier. But I do want to take us all to the United Kingdom. And y'all are known very broadly for your brutality of your own PSAs, because you guys are perfectly willing to actively involve children. Not as bystanders, not just as bystanders, but as active victims. So, we are far from the only people to bring terror into our safety films. You guys, the British, used to do it very effortlessly back in the 70s. And y'all were extremely willing to endanger children in these films. There was no fear of the video nasty warning. Almost everything was fair game. Most notable are the films Apaches, where a bunch of children are just one by one taken out on the farm. Play Safe, which is turned into a PSA, which you'll see to your right a little bit. I will show this once the recording stops. And now we go on to my personal favorite, The Finishing Line, which is from 1977. It was directed by documentarian John Frick of the British Transport Film Association. And it basically tells the story of a young boy who leaves a safety lecture and dreams of this horrific Hunger Gamesian-esque set of Rail Olympics starring himself and his classmates. It was banned in 1979 for gore, replaced the less gory but equally horrifying Robbie, where a young soccer-loving boy loses his feet for playing on the rails. There's 3 different versions of that PSA, one with electricized wires, one with an electricized track, and one with just basic no electricity background kind of stuff. But it was released from banishment in 1999, 2 years after your humble narrator was born. I have managed to find a portion of it available on YouTube, but I can't find the full thing. It is available in the UK via, I believe, the British Film Institute. As the States, I'm not going to say that it's available on Vimeo, but maybe it is. But here is a small subsection of The Finishing Line, which is from 1977. Harrowing. But these themes while gory, while horrifying, are all kind of universal at this point. You got to be good to your neighbor. You got to keep yourself clean. You don't drink and drive. You don't play on the train tracks. You don't climb the substations. You don't use gas and clean clothes, that kind of thing. But there were a lot that, of course, fed into the more outdated, bigoted fears. Fear of marijuana, fear of communists, fear of the unknown. But for our purposes, we're going to focus on one of the most well-known PSAs in the United States for all the wrong reasons. This is Boys Beware / Boys Aware, which was from 1961, restored in 1973, and re-released in 1979. We talked about Sid Davis. He was a hardline conservative, and he was mostly well known for this revolting, perfectly acceptable for the time, little bit of homophobia. There's a sequel film called Girls Beware, which centered around kidnapping and sex trafficking. No mention of lesbians, but you do get this to make up for it. All of this. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a second, but this film was so popular, it was released twice, once in glorious Technicolor. And it was lauded at the time as done by an exceptionally well done and in very good taste by the then Florida attorney, Richard Gerstein, who encouraged it to be played in Dade County schools. He is wrong on both points. But you need to understand, when you look at this, that in our country, there are still politicians who were very alive when this was playing, and there are people who were very alive when this was playing and when this was believed.
Let's take the case of Jimmy Barnes.
A sickness of the mind. I want to remind you, this was playing not too long ago. There's barely 50 years past now and then. There are plenty of people who watched this in their schools and believed every single word. But of course, we're supposed to be past this. We're supposed to be past the entire social safety film genre in general. They're neat little artifacts of bygone era. They're chopped and remixed and ripped over for a thousand times over for laughs. And no one's supposed to take them really seriously, right? But there's little parts that still live and breathe. In joke and parody, yeah, but in your click it and ticket and notices, in those little pleas for you to silence your cell phones before the film out of politeness, in getting your vaccination, and every time you see a PSA about getting vaccinated, that itself is the social safety film. But it's not all politeness in medicine. And there's still that same fear of the unknown. And for our purposes, for the last film we're going to really focus on, we're going to focus on that eternal fear of all anti-vaxxers. Autism. I Am Autism 2009, created by the American charity Autism Speaks as a combination between a social safety film and promotion for themselves. It was directed by the Children of Men and Roma creator Alfonso Cuarón, and it's despised by the autistic community. We hate this film, and you'll see why. If you want to read the full text of it, I'm not going to play the whole thing for you, both because it'll take too much time, and also I really don't want to. But you can read the full text on the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network's website. And what you'll notice is that there's a lot of similarities between what you're going to hear in the autism PSA and stuff you'll hear in this PSA I have from the March of Dimes, focusing on a character called the Crippler. This was about polio. So, polio, scared and you should be. You're scared and you should be. Gonna pull back the curtain for a second here. I'm autistic. So When you hear that, when you hear you're scared and you should be, they're talking about people like me. They're talking about people like me in the same way that they talked about polio. You're scared and you should be. And that's the entire crux of all of this.
I am autism.
The disease has changed. The portrayal has not. None of this has changed. The methodology will always be the same. It will always be fear. That's their main tool. That is the main tool of all PSA creators, from the people who make the perfectly rational drunk and driving PSAs to people who think that you should be terrified of autism. It's all fear. And it's fear that will be used against anything that they're afraid of. Drunk drivers, communists, autistic people, gay people, whoever they want, they will employ the same tactics. I spoke a little bit in the beginning of this talk about the musical Reefer Madness. And you can see the lyrics I talked about here. Once the Reefer's been destroyed, we'll start on Darwin and Sigmund Freud, and sex depicted on celluloid, and communists and queens. But I left out two sentences. At the end of the musical, the lecturer, who is essentially like our focal point for the overarching musical within the musical, comes out carrying a bag of money, as all profiteers off of this kind of thing tend to do. And he says two lines. When dangers near, exploit their fear. The ends will justify the means. We know the means and we know the end. The enemy at the end of the day is not, it's not the communist, it's not the autistic person, it's not the gay person. It's not. And when it comes to our genre, it's not trigger warnings or excessive gore or lack of gore or whatever. The enemy is not any of those things. The enemy is the person who's willing to take horror like a club, like a stick, and use it to destroy us. And rest assured, they will use it against us. If you are a lover of horror, you have seen the censorship things that are happening in this country and beyond. And all of that is with the same sort of mask as fear. And they will take our genre, pry off its face, put it on their own, and wear it while they destroy us. So, this was your brain on blood. Any questions?